Period. At the end of the day, the Nazi Party leadership were politicians. And like politicians today, they often preached one rule for the masses and one rule for themselves. The Nazis were officially, at least traditionalist and conservatively minded regarding women's rights and marriage. The Nazis believed that German women should be mothers and housewives foremost. They even handed out medals to mothers who produce large broods of children for the first future armies. Germany lagged way behind its enemies in the global south. Period. P. The mobilization and employment of women on war worker or service in the armed forces. Marriage was championed by the state, and divorce was frowned upon. So it is perhaps no surprise to us that the leaders who shouted the loudest about marriage, family, and women's roles failed to uphold their own rules. Almost all of the Nazi leaders chased women, cheated on their wives, or engaged in illicit relationships, including producing illegitimate children. Hitler, of course, never unboxed, married but did, to use the parlance of the period, live in sin with his secret girlfriend for decades, righteous Führer SS Heinrich Himmler, who espoused strong opinions on marriage and family life, separated from his wife for his secretary, and produced 2 illegitimate children. Martin Bormann, Hitler's private secretary and head of the Nazi Party chancellery throughout Germany, had 10 children with his wife, but still had the energy to have affairs with various actresses. The only one who seemed to remain faithful was Reich Marshal Hermann Göring, Hitler's nominated successor and head of the Air Force, who only married again long after his first wife's death, and seemed to be devoted to his second wife, an actress, and their young daughter. But the worst offender was probably Hitler's propaganda minister, Yusuf Gebib. His affairs have a somewhat sinister and manipulative tinge to them, and it can be argued that Gebib abused his position in order to fulfill his sexual desires. On the face of it, GBL was already punching well above his weight with his choice of wife, the attractive blonde Devore, Magda Goebbels, who was often referred to as the unofficial First Lady of the Third Reich due to her very close relationship with Hitler. She was a divorced single mother when she married Dr. Goebbels in 1931. She had become impressed with GBL's oratorical skills, his wit, and his charisma. Magda also had the social contacts and upper-class bearing that GBL's desired to elevate his own status, and the couple would go on to have 6 children together. But Goebbels was serially unfaithful throughout his marriage. He was sex-mad and had access to the most desirable women in Nazi Germany, famous actresses, because, as propaganda film studios and the theaters, he could quite literally make or break a star, and woe betired any young actress who tried to resist the Dr. charms. Why Goebbels behaved in this manner has been explained by psychiatrists. Thus, he was short-standing, only 1.65 mm or 5'5", in which was well below the average for a male Caucasian of the period. He was disabled, having an inward-turning deformed right foot that required him to wear a leg brace and caused him to visibly limp when walking. This disability had, of course, kept him out of the army in World War I, again, setting him apart from almost all the other Nazi leaders, who had chests full of medals and often heroic or extinguished war records. He also possessed a sickly, thin, rat-like countenance. The only things he had going for him were his mind, his charismatic oratory skills, his caustic wit, and his powerful position. Goebbels was not liked by the other leaders or by his own staff. One of his nicknames, the Poison Dwarf, was quite apt for him. He was thin-skinned, cold, dispassionate, and held grudges. He misused Nazi party funds to ensure his luxury lifestyle, but made himself absolutely indispensable to Hitler, who protected him, aided by his increasingly neglected wife. In other words, his inferiority complexes, due to his looks and disability, manifested themselves as an exaggerated masculinity that saw him constantly bragging to other men about his sexual conquests. At the heart of GBL's objectionable behavior was clearly a strong feeling that he didn't measure up, and he was about as far removed as it was possible to be from the Aryan Superman that his propaganda constantly exposed. He was a thoroughly nasty piece of work, a view held by many senior Nazis. GBL's obtained his sexual conquest through two avenues. Firstly, young secretaries and administrative staff of the propaganda ministry, and secondly, from his position as overlord of the German film and theater industries. Goebbels was extremely manipulative. His secretary recalled how he preyed on attractive young female members of his staff, pursuing them, betting them, and then, if they attempted to break off the affair, threatening suicide. Many of them were virgins, and little more than teenagers. However, his main diversion appears to have been actresses. One actress in particular held his attention for many years, a Czech actress called Barova. They had first met in 1936 and commenced an affair in 1937. Magda Goebbels had found out about the affair and complained to Hitler, prompting the Führer to rebuke Goebbels and order him to stop the affair, particularly as Hitler was about to annex the Czech Sudan land. The affair had been illicit. However, Bova's living boyfriend had eventually found out about the affair and had famously slapped her across the face in public, causing something of a scandal. Barova herself was finished as an actress in Germany, and was in fact labeled as a harlot. Gass's affair with Barova appears to have been quite consensual. However, that was not the case with all of them. Gass's then male secretary, K.L. Hunker, who would later go on to be a powerful guyer in the Nazi regime, had actually sided with Magda Goebbels over his boss's relationship with Barova, and produced a list of 36 actresses and other stars that he knew Goebbels had had affairs with. And for good measure, Magda also had an affair of her own with Hunker. One of GBL's other nicknames, apart from the Poison Dwarf, was the Randy Goat of Berg, a reference to the Babelsberg Studios. Pat, break, a period. In Berlin, on account of his predilection for young actresses, he was given this nickname, supposedly by the actress Baroness Irina von Mondorf, who had famously rejected his advances. She was famous enough for her career not to be particularly damaged by this encounter, and in the post-war period, she went on to marry British star James Robertson Justice. Others were less fortunate in their dealings with Goebbels. One up-and-coming actress who resisted GBL's casting couch was Almanyası'nın, whose new film was pulled from break, a period cinemas following her refusal to sleep with Goebbels. It destroyed her career. In fact, not all of the really established stars were salve from Goebbels. For example, Charlotte Tila was blacklisted in 1944 after refusing GBL's advances, specifically in sending back an expensive gift. GBL has used his lakeside villa at Boren 25 meter, north of Berlin, a 70-room mansion, to conduct many of his seductions of various actresses. At the end of the war, Goebbels positioned himself at Hitler's side, and indeed was the only Nazi leader to stay with Hitler to the very end, apart from Martin Bormann. Dr. GBLE succeeded Hitler as Reich Chancellor after the Führer's suicide on the 30th of April, 1945. He held his position for about 1 day. Realizing the situation was hopeless, he and his wife determined to die. They first poisoned their 6 children, and then GBL shot Magda Goebbels dead in the Reich Channery garden, and then shot himself. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, W Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.